Welcome to Bible Study for Life Transformation with Dr. George Budd. What follows is a message from my Bible study to help you on your personal journey of life transformation. If you're interested in acquiring the tools you'll need to apply the message of the Bible to your life, visit my website at BiStFLT.com. We've been doing a lot of waiting lately. In fact, that's all we've been doing. Waiting for normal to return, waiting for help, somehow answers to what's going on, waiting for word on our jobs or people we may care about. I mean, how are you doing with all that? I know for some people, I don't know if you've seen the meme, I've been training for this my whole life. But if you're like me, you might think that's you. But you're more a people person than you think. I remember a number of years ago now, I was on a sabbatical, and I'd decided during this sabbatical, I was going to take 2 weeks that I was going to be alone, just my guitar, my Bible, and God. And I headed out, and I was at this spot, and after about 3 days, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to walk down to the corner store just to hear people talk. We're not as introverted as we think, or so comfortable with being alone that we think. And I do know for most introverts, this isolation thing, this waiting might have its moments. But for others, this has become a nightmare. I mean, if there are tensions at home, you think about that. In this isolation, it is exaggerated. You can't avoid them. You run into them at every turn. Or there are those worries that show up. They just keep jumping out at you in those quiet moments where you worry about your job or your finances or the debts that are building up. Maybe it's the business that you own and you're wondering, will it survive? We spend our time calling the banks, filling out forms, trying to get a hold of somebody, listening to the news, trying to figure out what's going on. The truth is, we don't do so good at waiting. We want answers. We want to fix it, a remedy. We want a rescue. But this COVID thing has reminded everyone we're not as smart as we thought. We're not as advanced as we thought. We're not in control like we thought. I want to take you back to a time in Israel's history that might have felt just a little bit like we feel, trapped, fearful. So let me tell you a little story that might help set up the context for the verse that I want us to look at today. My story starts like this. Joram quietly sat at the back of the merchant's stall. He avoided any sound that would draw attention to himself. He had worked all day long. He'd been rolling up mats and hauling carpets from one place to the next. He'd been stuffing bags so people could carry their goods home. He'd loaded up wagons for people. Now you understand the merchant was not cruel, but he was demanding. This was the first rest that Jordan had had all day. It felt good to sit in the shade. The gentle breeze was blowing through the market. It brushed his hair. It cooled him off. There had been a lot of activity going on today. Everyone around him was excited, but no one ever told him what was going on. After all, he was just a slave. He was a nobody. He was like a machine. It was a tool by the merchant to get a job done. But people talked when the machines were quiet. No one noticed them. They were just like a piece of furniture. And Joram had heard what was causing the stir among the Jews, his people. They had lost absolutely everything because they had abandoned their God. Now, this was all before his time, but the stories of what had happened were horrid. the starvation and the death that was there in the midst of Jerusalem, the brutal treatment that had happened on their road into exile, 70 years of slavery. And this had been a second time. They had spent 400 years in Egypt. No home, no land, no freedom. And here they were again, no hope. God had abandoned them. That's what Joran had come to believe. He was stuck in the 2 square blocks of solitude he had to live in. He, yes, shared his home with his family, all his brothers and sisters. They all slept in one room. But he had to get up and he worked here at the market, and those 2 blocks, that was his whole life. It is everything he had ever known. Where was God in all this? There seemed to be no end to the solitude. Now, the gossip had all been about freedom. Cyrus had issued a decree, or so it was said, that any who wished to leave could return to their homelands. To what? To whom? Where was their God? And that, friends, was their experience. And that brings me to the passage I want us to look at today. It's in Isaiah chapter 40. Now, chapter 40 begins a change in the book of Isaiah. From chapter 40 right through to chapter 66. These are believed to be, at the end of the book here, the record of the oracles of Isaiah. So the visions, the prophecies, the word of the Lord from through Isaiah to the people. And it is filled with beautiful passages. This one that we're going to read is part of one unit. It begins in chapter 40. It runs right through 48. And then comes the servant sections. I absolutely love them. They're like the Old Testament gospel. I believe Paul and Peter and the others preached from the gospel of Isaiah. But here in chapter 40, Isaiah gives them hope amid their struggle. Just look at what it says. Verses 1 and 2. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. The Jewish people, they were still in Babylon as he wrote this. And after regaling them with their sins in the first bunch of chapters, God gives them hope. But first, they needed to be reminded who their God was. Take a look at verse 9. You who bring good news to Zion, go up on a high mountain. You who bring good news to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up, do not be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. Here is your God. Those that received this, both in Jerusalem and in Babylon, they were in exile, trapped like a rat. They couldn't move from anywhere except their home to work. No more than that. They were confined. They were captured. They were alone. Sound familiar? Alone. Isolated. But they needed to hear, here is your God. And Isaiah reminds them who they had forgotten. He is the one who controls the nations. In verses 12 to 17, he points that out for them. He's the one that controls the nations, raises up kings and brings them down. In verses 18 to 20, he reminds them that he is nothing like the idols that they have seen all around them. Nobody has made him. Nobody sets him up on a pedestal. He is their God. And then 21 to 26, he tells them he is the creator of all things. But then in verse 27, you have their present complaint. Look what it says. Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord? My cause is disregarded by my God. This is the situation of Joram in the story that I just told. And it may be just exactly how you feel. Abandoned. That you're suffering and the things you are feeling are not seen by God. Like your needs and what you need to have happen in your life are forgotten by him. But then Isaiah reminds them again of their God. Verse 28. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary, increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Now, there are some key words in this passage. Weary, weary, weary. Verse 28, 29, 30. And there are two different words that are used for this. The first is a failure in our physically, our failure, where we collapse through a loss of strength. We're unable to go on. That's why it's translated at the end of verse 31, faint. And then the other word is that of exhaustion. Because of the harshness of life, the toil, the labor, that you were just utterly exhausted. So what he's saying is that God does not collapse because he has no more strength. Nor is God exhausted because he has to sustain the world. He is not like us. He has strength and power that is unquenchable. He is your God, O Israel. Here is your God, my Christian brother or sister. And then comes the verse that we need to hear today. As you may wonder whether God has abandoned you or has abandoned our world. At the very least, you may feel like he's just too busy to hear your cry for help. As you struggle with doing the jobs that you have done so differently. As you are frustrated with family and with your kids and with the politicians. As you're tired of the rules and the restrictions of this whole COVID-19 thing. Isaiah's challenge rings true for all of us. Here is your God. Because once they see their God, once we see our God, then Isaiah gives them that promise. Verse 31, those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Or the version you likely heard, or maybe some. They that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up on wings like eagles. It is a promise filled with hope. And I know that the version you memorized or sang says wait. But hope is correct, as the NIV translates it, and so is wait. As long as you add faith to the idea of waiting. I want to give you a little bit of the nuance of the word. Because if you look at how it's translated in so many different places, it is translated 18 times as hope, 14 times as wait, 11 times as looked for, anticipated, and 4 times as trust. It is an expectant hope he's talking about here. It is an expectant waiting. And that hope is in the Lord. And by the way, in the Bible, if the Lord is capitalized, that means that it is indicating the word is Yahweh, the covenant-keeping God of Israel, the one that they have been reintroduced to, the one who controls the nations, even the King Cyrus, the one who created everything and he was not created. That is the God you wait in hope for. And the result will be an exchange of strength. Are you tired? Are you exhausted and weary? Have you come to the end of your rope? You know, I remember a poster that I had as a teen. I hung it up in my bedroom, and I have no idea why. It just struck me. But it was a big rope that at the end of it, they tied a knot in it. And a little kitten was there with one claw hanging in it and hanging off the end of the rope. And the caption was, if you get to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. That's what he's saying. You put your hope there in the Lord, and at that moment, he will exchange his strength for yours. That's the idea carried by the word renew, an exchange. And by the way, it's emphasized in the context. He is not one who grows weary. He is the creator of all things. And they that wait in hope for the Lord will renew their strength, will be exchanged with the Lord's strength for their weakness. So here's my question for you today. As you face struggles during your days, and I get that every day is not a bad day and all of the day isn't bad, but in these days of waiting, of isolation, when your fears rise, when your strength fades away, when you feel like this has got to end, who do you wait for? That's my question. Are you constantly harping on what the government ought to do for you, for everyone else, or how they ought to fix this? Who then are you waiting for? The political leaders? That they might provide an answer? The scientists? That they might give you a vaccine or a way to treat this? Or are you confidently waiting, hoping in the Lord your God? Are you looking for what he will do? Talking about your hope in him when you face those moments. If you seriously want your heart to soar, and yep, that's what it says, soar like an eagle. If you want that weakness and exhaustion to disappear, God's promise is, put your hope in me, the promise-keeping God. And he will exchange your weakness with his strength. They that wait with hope upon the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like an eagle. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Teach me, Lord, to wait in hope. God bless you, and see you next week. And by the way, if this video has blessed you, why not pass it on? You can share it on Facebook, then your friends will see the video. And you could just email to some people and friends who maybe aren't on Facebook. You can email the page link to a friend. This video can be found on my website, BiStFLT.com. B-I, Bible, S-T, study, F-L-T, for life transformation. God bless as we wait upon the Lord in this, our time of crisis.